If you own a business and expect to one day sell your business, you need to understand what it's worth now, what you could do to maximize the value, and how best to position it for an M&A transaction in the future. Economics Partners is Utah's premier business valuation and strategic consulting firm. Go to econpartners.com for a free consultation. econpartners.com. Spend your Labor Day weekend at the Soldier Hollow Sheepdog Classic, presented by your local Utah Toyota dealers. It's 4 days of family fun and exciting competition featuring the world's top sheepdogs. More info and tickets at soldierhollowclassic.com.
KSL News Radio, Cougar Sports Saturday, Cougar Tracks here on your legacy home of the BYU Cougars. But I got to tell you, the big conversation, I think, for BYU fans is Big 12 expansion, because it goes well beyond just a single game. These are decisions that impact years and years for athletic departments. And one of the men that's on the forefront of all the news regarding conference expansion, he's America's college football insider, now with the Action Network, actionnetwork.com. He is the great Brett McMurphy. Brett, thanks for taking the time to join me today. And you had a report on Friday that the Big 12 focused on Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and BYU. This feels like this is moving awfully fast. And what's motivating the Big 12 right now?
Survival, really. And yeah, it is moving very quickly. Sources told me that official invitations could be extended possibly as soon as this month. When exactly the teams could join the Big 12 is still up in the air. Obviously, a lot of moving pieces in place. But I think specifically for BYU, there's hope within the conference that BYU potentially could join the league even as early as next year. Now, obviously, Tom Holmoe has a myriad of Power 5 conference contracts lined up in future years. So BYU would have to navigate that and get out of those deals. But I was also told that whether it's BYU and the other 3 teams from the American, when they join the league, that potentially they could actually join the league while Oklahoma and Texas is still in the league if Oklahoma and Texas are not able to get out of the Big 12 before the summer of 2024. So there's obviously a lot of different things in play there. But the good news is for the Cougars, multiple sources told me that BYU is the clear-cut number one choice. And one reason is because of BYU's independent status. Obviously, there's no exit fees as far as football. Also, they want BYU as a full member. They are not looking for a football-only member. I'm sure that's good news for Cougar fans. And so, what I also was told is this decision, TV market plays a lot. That obviously helps BYU. But they said, probably 75% of the decision was based on football success and relevancy, and probably 25% related to men's basketball. So now BYU, certainly, Gonzaga and the West Coast is no slouch, but there's a big drop-off after the top there. But now they would be going to a league that arguably people within the Big 12 thinks is the best in the country. You've got the defending champs from Baylor, obviously at the forefront, Kansas, a number of schools there. So I guess I do have one question for you, and I guess, when does the parade start?
It's ready to start. I mean, BYU, this is what they've been dreaming of, Brett, and you know this as well as anyone. I mean, this has been a long, ongoing deal with Big 12 expansion and BYU hoping and trying to get into that thing. But, as you well know, Brett, there's been maybe logistical hurdles with BYU when it comes to no Sunday play. And when I hear all sports for BYU, is that no longer suddenly an issue, the no Sunday conversation?
I think it's something that both parties feel that they will find a way to get through this, but that's how badly the Big 12 needs BYU. And I'm not saying obviously BYU is not going to start playing on Sunday. I don't want to insinuate that. I'm just saying I think the Big 12 is looking at this a little bit differently, and that let's find out a way to make this work where we can work with BYU to accommodate that. Obviously, that won't impact football at all, and that's the big driver in this thing. But again, what's changed in the past years when I've talked to you and other media in Provo and Salt Lake City is, before, the schools were kind of always looking at adding schools from other power leagues. But then when you have, the two bell cows, Oklahoma and Texas, leave for the SEC, at that point, you're looking for the best brands that are available, and you got to shore up the membership because you go from 10 to 8. Arguably, which is funny, the league would make more money per school with 8 members than it would with 12. But you can't have an 8-member league these days. You have 5 non-conference games. You'd be an independent at that point as a league. So that doesn't work. So now what they want to do is they want to bolster the league with the strongest football products out there. Hey, it's great to be BYU right now, and you guys could not have had a better season to have the year you guys had last year, because that puts you at the forefront. And, you just go back 5 or 10 years and look at different schools and how they would have been perceived differently. Look, I'm based in Tampa. USF has hit rock bottom. That's putting it politely. But if you go, back 10 years or so, USF would have been an attractive option.
Yeah.
This script has totally flipped. So BYU's in great position now. And I think, now, as far as your initial question, when can this happen for BYU? I think the Big 12 would love to have them sooner rather than later, and that's not a play on words with Oklahoma. But it all boils down to how quickly can Tom rearrange the future schedules and, take care of that, because you obviously can't just eliminate every future schedule to join the Big 12. That's going to take a lot of hard work. But certainly, I think it's realistic that BYU could actually join the Big 12 before these other 3, because the other 3 from the American contractually have to give 27 months notice. Now, they can obviously get out sooner by paying a higher buyout, but like I said earlier, it's just a lot easier for BYU to join the Big 12 as soon as possible. I actually joked with the source and said, you're like this. I said, is there any chance BYU could join the league in 2021? They said, I don't think we can move that quickly. So I did try.
It's Brett. I'm talking with Brett McMurphy here from theactionnetwork.com. Congrats, by the way, on the new position with the Action Network. You're doing a fantastic job, as always, as America's college football insider. And I get this sense, Brett, when you talk about the schedule, I thought it was notable when a week or so ago, it's all blurring together, but George Kliavkoff from the Pac-12 conference, he was saying something like, with the alliance scheduling, it could maybe start as soon as next year. And I thought to myself, like, hey, BYU's got a lot of Pac-12 inventory. They got some Big Ten inventory. They got some ACC inventory. That could probably work nicely for all these TV partners to maybe arrange it with BYU, unloading those games and allowing the alliance to do their thing. This seems like it maybe truly could work potentially next year if everything kind of falls into place.
Yeah, well, I think one thing, look, I have no idea what Tom's going to do scheduling-wise. But just looking at what other power schools do, and maybe this will be, I don't know if this will be a refreshing change for BYU fans, but it'll be different. It'll be probably pretty similar to when you guys were in the Mountain West. But, when you're going to be playing, 8, 9, maybe they go to 10-game conference schedule in the Big 12. I have no idea. Obviously, those things got to be decided. But your other 2 games, other than Utah, you're probably not going to play, all Power 5 teams out of conference, because there's no reason to. The mindset now for BYU totally changes, and I think for the better. And I've talked to you about this before and others. I think the difficulty with BYU as an independent is basically you've got to go 12-0 to have any shot to make the playoff. And once you lose that one game, you're going to, for instance, this year, you lose one game, you're 11-1 or you're 6-6, and you're going to the Independence Bowl. Well, now when you're in the Big 12, everything changes. You can lose a game, you can lose 2 games, win the Big 12 conference, and you've got a shot to get to the playoff. So I think that will pay off huge dividends for BYU, just morale-wise, as far as the team, knowing that the carrot at the end of the stick, you can actually get to it now as far as the college football playoff. And obviously, also, this is a no-brainer, but this is going to be a huge boost to recruiting, because now you're recruiting, you're going out there and you're telling recruits, hey, we're going in to play in the state of Texas. your family can come see us play 1 or 2 times a year in the state of Texas. We're going to be, prime TV appearances and all that. And also, everything that they sell about coming to play at BYU. So, a lot of people have said this, and Utah, you guys can look at Utah as example 1A. When these schools that were not in power leagues, once they get to a power league and they have the resources, meaning the money and everything that comes along with that, you look at how good these schools can be. TCU is another example. And I think BYU will benefit greatly from this in the very near future.
UCCU is delivering HELOCs with a 6-month introductory rate of only 0.99%, and they're doing it in record time.
The housing market in Utah is booming. The median price for a house in Utah rose more than 30% over the past year alone.
That means you may have even more equity in your home than you realize. A HELOC is the perfect way to put your home's equity to work for you.
Just fill out an easy application right from your phone or computer at uccu.com.
Low rates, no fees, faster than ever.
UCCU. Love where you bank.
Hi, ever wonder what it's like to face a 350-pound lineman who wants to smash you into the ground? I know what that feels like. Scott Mitchell here, and I want to tell you about my podcast, Helmets Off, where I talk about the pressures of being an NFL quarterback and some of the other pressures pro athletes face when the helmet is off. It's a podcast, and you can get it free on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and at KSLSports.com.
You mentioned the Power Conference label. I know a lot of BYU fans out there are wondering, will the Big 12 maintain its power status? Now, from my understanding, the NCAA was the one that deemed the Autonomous 5 conference status, but I kind of look at it, Brett, and I feel like into the future, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're Power Conference or not. It's simply, well, you're going to make far less TV revenue than the Big 10 and the SEC, but in this potential 12-team playoff era in the future, it doesn't matter if you're Power Conference or not. You might still have access to the playoff potentially.
Well, yeah, it's still to be determined with the playoff, and you're right. The top 6 conferences, whether they're power leagues or not, will get in automatic bids for the playoff, and then the rest will be filled with the highest ranked at large teams. The Autonomy 5, basically the autonomy, those power leagues basically came up with that on their own and basically told the NCAA that, hey, this is what we're going to do. So that is in place for 5 more years until the current 14 playoff expires. At that time, the Autonomous 5 will then decide what they're going to do moving forward as far as the playoff. And why is that important is because those Autonomous 5 members, they get basically 75% of all of the revenue from the college football playoff, and the remaining 25%. And I'm guesstimating on these percentages, but it's a much lower percentage, is divided up between the remaining 65 schools. What is critical for not only BYU but the Big 12 is to make sure that the Big 12 is that there is an Autonomous 5, that they don't try to reduce that to a Autonomous 4 conferences or a Power 4. You're right about still having the same access to the playoff, but the biggest difference would be the amount of money you would receive from the playoff, which obviously BYU gets chump change right now. That would change instantly. Again, but that's something better to look for. And it's real quickly as far as TV money. Look, without OU in Texas, the Big 12 revenue is going to probably be cut in half. But you know what? Half of what the Big 12 makes is still at least double what BYU is getting now in their ESPN exclusive deal.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Brett McMurphy here for a few more moments. So what's the next steps, Brett? What's the next steps for the Big 12 expansion subcommittee and ultimately the Big 12 presidents?
Well, like I said, I was told that the official invites could come as soon as this month. Once that happens, then, the lawyers get a bill a lot more hours and figure out how soon this can get done. Specifically for BYU, the question is, how quickly can they make this work? Is 2022 realistic? Do they want to wait till 2023? That's something that has to be figured out. Will the American, how much are they going to hold Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston to this 27-month notice. They let UConn out with only 12 months notice, but quite frankly, they probably were glad to get rid of UConn. This is different. This is like OU and Texas leaving the Big 12, losing Cincinnati and UCF. Obviously, Houston is a big market team. So I doubt the Americans just going to say, okay, guys, just go ahead and leave. But I think another domino, which, BYU fans may or may not care, so I'll make it brief, is what does the American do now? If I'm the American, their big selling point has been we're better than the rest of the other non-power leagues. If you want to stay better than the rest of the non-power leagues, then I go raid the Mountain West. I go after Boise. I go after San Diego State, Colorado State Air Force, whoever it is. And then you make sure you remain that sixth best conference, because if not, the Mountain West could emerge as the best of the rest. But hey, you guys don't care about those non-power conferences anymore, right? You're big time now.
Well, I am curious though, Brett. What maybe has not made Boise more of a factor in the conversation? I'm not too surprised by it, just because the on-field product is great, but the location is really extreme. The fan base doesn't seem as large as maybe you would think. What's maybe catapulted Houston maybe above, say, a Boise or Colorado State or someone like that? What's made these three AAC teams more attractive than some of the Mount West programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I talked to some sources about that the past couple of days. And basically, the four that will get the invites, the next four that were considered was Boise, Memphis, SMU, and USF. After that, obviously, there were many schools from the Mountain West, the American, Conference USA, or whatever, that contacted them. But those were basically the final eight. And kind of the way it broke down is, as far as Boise State, obviously their football success is well documented. But other than that, there's the overall athletic department, I don't think is as strong as the other schools that they're being compared to. And I don't think necessarily that it broke down this way geography wise, but one source, when I asked him this question, he goes, I think you're kind of onto something. And basically when you look at the final eight, it was almost like it was a competition between four sets of teams. BYU was viewed as stronger as Boise, so that's why they're taking BYU. Cincinnati was viewed stronger than Memphis. That's why they're taking Cincinnati. UCF, a slam dunk over USF, and Houston over SMU. It's almost like they didn't want two schools that I just paired together from that one area unless they were just so much better than everybody else. And so I think that's kind of how it was broken down. Boise obviously has done a lot of great things, but I think their overall athletic department is not anywhere as strong as any of the four that are getting in. But I think basically, BYU getting in may have sealed Boise's fate with this whole thing as well.
Last thing for you, Brett, before we go, do you feel like these moves, if and when invitations happen for these programs to go to the Big 12, will this create some stability for the Big 12 conference? Because I got to imagine that some of these teams, the Iowa States, the Kansases, the Oklahoma States, got to have a wandering eye and maybe potentially want something better, or they truly bought into the prospects of this future conference.
No, look, they're all committed to their conference until they get a better offer. I mean, that's being just realistic. I mean, the SEC's at the top. Alabama could leave the SEC tomorrow. There's no exit fee. They don't have any exit fees. The SEC doesn't need any, because where are you going to go unless they join the NFC South? You can't leave. You can leave the SEC. There's no exit fees. The reason why you have exit fees is because teams are going to leave if they have better offers. So, like it or not, but there's a pecking order in college athletics, and it's SEC, Big Ten at top, and after that you've got the ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12. And depending on what year and what the current media deals are, those kind of fluctuate, but those three are the next. And then after that, you've got the American, Mountain West, and then the remaining three Group 5 leagues. So if anybody has an offer from a league that's above you in that totem pole scenario I just gave you, unless there's some just binding reason on why they would stay in a league where they're going to make less money, unfortunately, they're probably going to jump to another league. So when you ask about is there stability for the Big 12, the best news for the Big 12, and I mentioned this either to you or some other folks in Utah a couple weeks ago when this was all breaking down with OU Texas, I said the best scenario for BYU is that nothing else happens in the conferences, because that means the Big 12 would remain with 8 remaining members. They would have to build their league up, because if the Big 10 would have decided to add Kansas and Iowa State, and the ACC would have added West Virginia, and say the Pac-12 goes to 16 and they grab 4 more from the Big 12, well, then what's left of the Big 12? Maybe 2 schools. Then those schools would have gone to the American. There wouldn't have been a power league, and then BYU would have had to get on with the American. So the stability is only there until somebody above them decides to make a move. The good news is this so-called alliance with the Big 10, Pac-12, and ACC means they're not going to do anything, at least in the near future. The ACC's media right deals are through 2036. That's 15 years. So possibly it could settle for a while, and that gives BYU and these other new members with the Big 12 a chance to prove that they belong. And you know what? Get to the playoff. You know, the Big 12 needs to win a playoff game one of these years, and that adds credibility to your league. And also, I think that creates stability long term.
You can follow him on Twitter at Brett_McMurphy. He is America's college football insider, now with ActionNetwork.com. Brett, always appreciate the time. We'll keep reading your bylines. Fantastic work as always covering college football. Appreciate the time, Brett.
Please tell Tom to send me an invite to the parade. I expect to be there.
He's Brett McMurphy here on KSL News Radio.